Na szybko, kolejnym gościem, który opowie nam o wolności lub jej braku w Białorusi, będzie nasz przyjaciel, libertarianin, aktywista, z którym jako Centrum Kapitalizmu też już nie jeden projekt robiliśmy. Nasz przyjaciel Franciszak Dziadow. Zapraszamy na scenę.
Cześć wszystkim. Hi everyone. As you may know, my name is Franciszak. I'm libertarian from Belarus. I moved to Poland about 2.5 years ago, and the thing I noticed is that people in Poland in generally have quite a good understanding of situation in Belarus. Maybe better understanding than people from other countries. But there were also some opinions I noticed in like neo-liberty-minded areas that were quite surprising for me. Like, have you ever heard that it is easier to do business in Belarus? Yeah. There are some more things, like in Belarus, it's true, there were no lockdown measures, and also in some cases taxes are not so high. And it makes some people say that, yeah, Lukashenko is dictator, but he is not so bad from some perspectives. Well, my goal today is to prove to you that as a libertarian, from which side you wouldn't look, you cannot say that it is not so bad. Let's start from the basics. Lukashenko came to power in 1994. I am 27 years old. It means that when I was born, Lukashenko was already in power. And that's true for all guys you can meet in our Belarusian stand there in foyer. We lived all our lives during Lukashenko dictatorship. We thinking about different Belarus, thinking about the fact that in the future I will see Belarus without dictatorship. Even though I know it's true, at least because Lukashenko is not so young as I am, but it's like thinking about unicorns or dragons is just something out of imagination. When Lukashenko came to power, he very quickly became a dictator. He focused all the power in his own hands. He switched symbols to the ones that were in Soviet Union and started political repressions, including murder of key opponents. Political parties and movements continued to exist, but as long as they were weak and were not able to impose any threat to the regime. As soon as it was any even remote danger to the regime, the political field was cleaned out. It happens after every presidential election. At the moment, there are more than 1,700 political prisoners in Belarus. This number is number of people who have like long prison terms of like several years or decades. It is not included, people who are detained for like 15 days or something like that are not included in this number. People go, you can get detained, for example, for wearing clothes in politically incorrect colors, or having some boxes with white, red, boxes like from LG television standing right near your window. It happens all the time. We are used to it, unfortunately. But well, you may say, okay, we understand that Lukashenko is dictator, but what about economic freedom? Maybe it is easier to do business there if you wearing clothes with politically correct colors and not involving in politics at all. Well, let's talk about economic freedom. The most important thing for economic freedom, in my opinion, and I think you will agree with me, are property rights. Property is essential. Personally, I usually don't distinguish like personal and economic freedom because it all comes from property right. Going back to Belarus, do you know the word kolkhoz? For those who don't know, it's like collectivized state-owned farms. So at the moment, these are like about 95% of all agricultural lands are owned by this kolkhoz in Belarus. Also, the Soviet industries were not privatized. So government simply dominates the market in Belarus. But well, okay, let's leave aside the government property, the fact that we are at large extent socialist in classical understanding of this word. Let's talk about private business. Once again, about property rights, I have one important example. About a year ago, major private medical centers were shut down by the government at one moment, just like that. There are rumors that people related to Lukashenko are getting into this private medical business and just getting rid of the concurrents. These are rumors. I don't know how much of them are true, but what we can say definitely is that nobody is protected in the country if Lukashenko wants to shut him down, no matter how important, how big, and how old this business is. To understand, it's like shut down LuxMed and other similar enterprises here in Poland. Another important example. In 2020, before presidential elections, there was one potential candidate who was a CEO of the bank. Of course, he was detained. He remains in prison till nowadays. And there were searches in his bank, in banking cells. Police just came, opened cells of usual people who store their whatever they store in those cells, and took it and never returned back. Talking about property rights. And it's very common for Belarusian police to take some things for like investigation and never to return back. It happened to my own family as well. When police came to the house of my parents to arrest my mother, they also did a search and confiscated laptops, for example, and not only laptops owned by my family, but for example, working laptop of my father that belonged to the company he worked in. Talking about economic freedom, about easy providing business. Every entrepreneur, when he wants to do business in Belarus, should take these risks into account. Is it really a good way, a good country to say that it is easy to do business in? I don't think so. Going on with this. There is still one more thing that I mentioned in the beginning. Yes, during COVID, there was no lockdown in Belarus. Like in spring 2020, Belarus was one of the few countries in Europe where you could go outside without risk of, without need to pay fine for it. And it is horrible that such situation took place in Belarus. But at the same year, in the summer, in Belarus, you could go outside and be arrested and beaten by police just for going outside. If some of you were at previous weekend Kapitalizmu, you may remember a speech of my brother who told his own story of being arrested and beaten up by police. And he was quite far from places where people were protesting at that moment. A lot of people just went to a shop to buy some milk and were arrested and beaten. Going back to lockdown. In Poland, some brave businesses, and it was mentioned in panels yesterday, opened their businesses during lockdown. And there is one important detail here that you can't imagine to happen in Belarus. That was also mentioned in yesterday's panels. There were court cases where people won against government that they were not wrong about opening their business. Court win against the government in a politically motivated case. As something difficult to imagine for me. When commenting protests in 2020 and especially police actions during protests, Lukashenko said that there are some situations where we shouldn't care about the law. I think it pretty much sums it up. Yesterday also, people said a lot of things about how important it is for entrepreneurship to have stable rules. Which stable rules, which freedom, liberty, in any extent we can talk about, where the head of the government, where the dictator, openly tells that he doesn't care about his own laws. I think that no. Thank you.